Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium. I hope that I'm coming through loud and clear because I'm doing this very early in the morning on Thursday, December 12th, 2019. The reason why is I wanted to get up because right now Britain is, of course, in the midst of a general election. Hello to Stephanie Ostalkowitz in the chat room. I hope I'm coming through, Stephanie, because I had a few problems getting everything wired up. Now, before I get to the topic of the day, which of course is the general election in Great Britain, I do want to remind you tomorrow we are having a vid chat. That'll be the late one at 6:30 U.S. Central Time. As always, I'll be in the chat room early for a little bit of pre-chat. Those of you who sent questions for the canceled vid chat last week, I did archive those, so I still have those. The rest of you, please get your questions in. This will be the second to the last vid chat of the year. After tomorrow's vid chat, there will be another one a week from tomorrow, and then that will be it until 2020. And I had to laugh before I decided to get up and do this vid chat. I had just read an article that Angela Merkel, I mean, this is a knee slapper, folks. Angela Merkel claims that Germany can't defend itself alone. you know, Forget about 1914 and 1939. Anyway, the news of the day, and I've posted this article from the UK Sun. It's a tabloid newspaper if you're not familiar with it, about this last polling data that came in yesterday before the election today. And it's very interesting because I've been watching Prime Minister Johnson and the Tory party's poll numbers. About 2 weeks ago, they had a significant lead over their major contender, which would be, of course, the Labour Party under Mr. Corbyn. But that lead has been steadily whittled away. So it's between right now 9 and 11 points. But I want to read you something from this article. It's titled Election Poll Bombshell Down to the Wire for Boris as Tory Majority Slashed 24 hours before the vote. Now listen to this. This is very, very interesting. And I'm gonna offer some speculation as to why the Tory party's numbers appear to be so soft. And there's a very interesting set of numbers in this article. I want you to listen very carefully. And I'm going to comment towards the end of it. So here we go. The last YouGov MRP poll before this week's crunch vote has dramatically cut the predicted size of the Conservative Party's majority in the House of Commons. The forecast showed the Tory lead down to 9 points from 11 points since a similar poll last month. The Tories are forecast to win 339 seats out of 650 in the general election, down from 359 in the last poll, but up from 317 in the 2017 general election. That would still be the party's best performance since 1987. The Labour Party is forecast to lose 31 seats and end with a total of 231, putting the party on course for its worst performance since 1983. And that, of course, was the general election between Prime Minister Thatcher and Mr. Neil Kinnock, who was the leader of the Labour Party at the time. If the election, listen to these numbers very carefully, folks, listen carefully. If the election was held tomorrow, the poll forecasted the Tories would have a 43% share of the vote, followed by Labour with 34%, the Liberal Democrats, who tend to be Remainers, folks, at 12%, and the Brexit Party at 3%. Now, let me skip ahead in this little article to the last few paragraphs. Quote, the margins are extremely tight, and small swings in a small number of seats, perhaps from tactical voting and a continuation of Labor's recent upward trend, means we can't currently rule out a hung parliament. As things currently stand, there are 85 seats with a margin of error of 5% or less. For the last 7 days, YouGov interviewed around 100,000 panelists about their voting intentions in today's general election. The poll's margin of error also means a hung parliament is not impossible, meaning Mr. Johnson has just 24 hours left of campaigning to secure victory on Thursday. And this, of course, was written yesterday. Now, look at those numbers again. Tories at 43%, Labor 34%, Liberal Democrats 12%. Now you add the 12 to Labor, and that brings them up to 46% in a dead heat with the Tories. And then the Brexit Party would be left with 3% if they gain any seats at all. That could tip the balance one way or another. So my question is, Ian Tuff in the chat room says YouGov is worthless. The SNP have blown it. That I don't know. I don't know that much about the polling in the United Kingdom. I'm just going on these numbers here. But my real question is if those numbers are correct, why is the Tory party and its support so apparently soft? And my suspicion is, and I don't know about you folks living in the United Kingdom, but when, Ian also says the Liberals in the chat room, the Liberals won't work with Labor. Apparently they won't work with anybody. My question is why is the Tory party so support so soft? And my suspicion is, and you folks in the United Kingdom can comment and set me straight on it if you're disagreed with this speculation. But my speculation is that when Mr. Johnson made the announcement, I went online and downloaded that agreement that he had worked out. And my impression is, number one, I have to agree with Mr. Farage here. My impression in reading what was worked out was that it is another treaty. And what struck me more than anything else in looking at it was the vast amount in the appendices, in the annex to the agreement, was the vast amount of European Union regulations that would still remain in place in the United Kingdom if this deal went through. So in other words, it looks to me, sitting over here across the pond and looking at what's going on over there, it looked an awful lot to me like all that Mr. Johnson did was he kind of dressed up a few aspects of the deal that Mrs. May had worked out and put a few shiny baubles and beads on it and repackaged it a bit, but substantially I didn't see that much different. And it didn't look to me, again, speaking as someone here across the pond and looking at it from some distance, it didn't look to me like much of a Brexit. We'll see, what the turnout and what the voters in the United Kingdom think about this. But I suspect that the Tory party's, and, again, we may be shocked, we may be stunned at the result. These days, polls aren't very reliable on either side of the Atlantic Ocean, as we know. but looking at it, that would be my explanation for why it appears that the Conservative Party's support is so soft. So it's going to be an interesting day. As I said, I couldn't sleep. I woke up early because I knew that this was general election day in Great Britain. And I've been following this story, and I'm kind of curious as to what the election turnout is actually going to do. and if any of these poll numbers are going to show up in the results at all, or if we're going to have a real shocker, if we're going to have some sort of stunning upset. In the chat room, Ian is saying it's the same here as in the U.S. It's divide and conquer, all smoke and mirrors. Your work on the Nazi International is spot on. Democracy is betrayed and trouble is being brewed worldwide. Well, again, I don't know. I don't know the extent of what I've been calling Nazi International or Fascist International or Fascist Mafia or Mr. Globaloni. It depends on my mood at the time. I do know that globalism has an extensive representation in the United Kingdom. Just how that's tied in with fascism, other than, the EU is really all about Germany. We all know that. But the problem that I'm seeing here is that polls are unpredictable. They're not reliable anymore. And I think a lot of it's showing up here in the soft support for the Tory party. We don't even know if people are lying to the pollsters because they're so fed up. So it's going to be a very, very interesting election to see what comes out of this. If they end up with a hung parliament, then, Mr. Johnson's got his work cut out for him. He might have to go back and, call another general election. So, I don't know. I don't know where any of this is going to go. We're going to see just exactly what happens. What shocked me here with these numbers was that they were saying the Brexit Party was only polling at about 3%. Now, I do know that Mr. Farage was only running candidates in certain constituencies, not as he had originally thought, everywhere. So we're going to see what happens here. I've been very clear about my own stance on it. If I were a Briton, I would be in favor of Brexit, but we're going to have to see what happens today. It's going to be a very, very interesting result. If any of you in the United Kingdom have any other perspective, please add them to the comments or email me at the website, because this is going to be a very, very interesting election result, one way or the other. I just get the feeling in looking at these numbers that something is brewing in the UK, and we're going to see what happens to it. Elixir So says, having former Tory Prime Minister John Major asking people not to vote for conservative candidates has had an impact. Leave it to John Major to listen. Listen, nothing surprises me anymore. We've got those types over here. We call them rhinos, Republican in name only. So apparently you've got Tinos in the United Kingdom, like Mr. Major, Tory in name only. I was in Great Britain during the Thatcher era, so that's skewed my perspective a bit on Mr. Major. But I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because you've got the same phenomena over here. You basically have the globalist philosophy and a what I would call a nationalist sort of philosophy. And it's shot through both political parties, major political parties over here, just like it is in the United Kingdom. So it's going to be interesting. I've said for a long time that basically you had a more or less a collapse of the old Thatcher dry element within the Tory party. So it's going to be interesting, folks. In the chat room already, I'm getting comments here. In the chat room, Marcel Stegman is saying rumors are that the Netherlands have to sponsor Deutsche Bank, and someone else in the chat room says that Peter Hitchens, that's Christopher Hitchens' brother, is telling people to leave Britain. Well, that's another thing. This is happening in this country as well. There are many, many Americans that are just looking at this system and saying it's broken beyond repair, and that are leaving the country. Or you find significant nullification movements afoot in several American states. It's going on right now in Virginia. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Another comment just now in the chat room: the worse the weather, the worse it is for Labor Party. And this individual says it's 4 to 7 degrees centigrade today with rain forecast from 1300 hours. So it's interesting. It's interesting. It's going to be an interesting turnout, folks, and I imagine we'll be discussing it in the future, because I have a feeling that a lot of people on both sides of the aisle in the United Kingdom are going to be surprised in some cases. Anyway, that's it for today's news and views. Don't forget, we do have the vid chat tomorrow, 6:30. I'll be in the room early for a little bit of pre-chat. I do have the previous questions archived. If you're planning to show up for vid chat, please get your questions in early. And best wishes for all you folks in the United Kingdom. And we'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye, folks. God bless.